Let's talk to Dr. Kehinde Andrews, who's a professor of Black Studies at Birmingham City University. Good morning to you, Kehinde.
Morning.
Good morning to you. A lot of people have been very critical of this report. The Sky, BBC, the newspapers, full of people saying that this is, to all intents and purposes, a whitewash, and it's ignoring what a lot of people are saying is the lived experience of Black and other ethnic minority people in this country. Do you agree?
Well, it doesn't just ignore the lived experience. It actually ignores all the data and the research that's been carried out over the years. I mean, the government itself just had two reports in 2017, the race disparity audit, the Lamy review, which showed very clearly that institutional racism is a factor. But I think the key thing here is that I'm not surprised about this. I basically laughed when I saw this, because it's so absurd and ridiculous. The point of this report was not to genuinely get into these issues. It was they got a bunch of institutional racism deniers to deny institutional racism. And that's
institutional
what the
racism deniers. Now,
yeah.
Again, that term comes up. That term started with people. No, let me finish. That term started with Holocaust deniers, and now it's climate deniers. Then it's sort of COVID deniers, and now it's institutional racism deniers. So someone who disagrees with your view on that is a denier, as opposed to someone who has an honestly different take based on the same facts that you're seeing. That's not being a denier. Well, no. That's just someone disagreeing with you.
No, because if you actually look at this data properly, there is nothing to disagree with. And this is what I'm trying to say. Read that report as somebody, and it's very rare I play the academic card. If this was submitted as a first year, I would have actually given it a 0. It's appalling. If you actually look at the evidence, and the evidence that they used, you cannot come to a conclusion that there's no institutional racism unless you're a liar or a fool.
All right. Yes, first up, let's talk. What do we mean by institutional racism? And explain what the data and the evidence is that means it's impossible to come to any conclusion other than that Britain is an institutionally racist country.
So institutional racism, which is first coined by Carmichael and Hamilton, says it's a system which isn't just about the school or about the banks or about the one part. It's about a society which consistently reproduces racial and equal outcomes. And so let's just take one example: COVID deaths for minorities. Very clearly more likely to die. Why is that? Because of employment, because of location, because of class, because of lots of things. But if you look at any data in this country, it will tell you there is a significant ethnic penalty in terms of class, in terms of economics, in terms of education. That is an institutionally racist society by definition.
Okay, but here's the thing. If it is the case that it happens that some ethnic groups, or indeed all minority ethnic groups in this country, are more at risk of, say, something like COVID, that doesn't necessarily mean that it involves racism. It may be, as this report suggests, in lots of areas, whether it's education or jobs, whatever. Actually, as I was saying in the intro, a lot of it can be explained by where people living in urban areas, the schooling they've had, the family unit, all of income, all of those aspects. Those aren't necessarily racist, are they? On the argument and the facts and the evidence and the data that suggested it's not about racism is that those things can affect people who are white as much as they can affect people who are Black or Asian or other ethnic minority groups. We see that poor white working class boys are also affected by a lot of the same problems, and that by definition can't be racism. So maybe it is more down to income and class and geography and education.
No, but this is why I say it's not a genuine attempt, because we had these debates. I mean, we do talk about this all the time in the academic field around this. It isn't just about race is clearly a factor. But if you want to, you can't understand geographic location without race. Why is it that half of all Black people live in London and the vast majority live in inner city overcrowded areas? That's because of racial discrimination in the housing market. Why is it that Black people are far more likely to be on preschool meals?
Black people can't buy
because of racism in the employment market.
Racial discrimination. Look, I have no doubt. We've seen studies where you've got a landlord who says, "Oh no, I'm so sorry." 2 Black people turn up to rent a home or buy a home. Oh no, I'm ever so sorry that lease is already gone. And a white couple turn up and they get given it. It's no doubt at all there are some racists. 100%. No one's pretending that's not the case.
It's not about some racists.
That's what I'm asking. What do you mean? Where is the institutional racism in the housing market?
Where is are you actually being serious? I mean, yes. Do you think it's a coincidence that most ethnic minorities live in a few cities, in inner city areas, in deprived inner city areas? You think that's a coincidence?
True. I'm not an academic, Kehinde, but I could suggest some good reasons for that. One is that an awful lot of ethnic minorities in this country are first or second generation immigrants, and that it is normal in every society, in every country around the world, that people who emigrate to a country often go to an area where there are already people people from the same country, from the same background where they are living,
the
because that's
explanation.
where they know. And also that poorer people people who arrive, who immigrants, are often at the lower end of the income scale, and they live in inner cities. And as people get older, and as generations continue, they move out into more expensive areas. But that takes a couple of generations.
That has not happened? And the reason that has not happened for particularly for black and minority ethnic people, I'm like second generation, my kids are third generation, and you still see that hasn't happened. So that immigrant thing, you were right, tends to happen, but hasn't happened for us, is because of racial discrimination in the housing market. The reason that we live in the same area is not because we wanted to live together, it's because we weren't allowed to live anywhere else.
What do you mean weren't allowed? Your children are not allowed to buy a home outside an urban area. Tell me why.
This is where you have to take into historical context.
Right.
My parents were not allowed to live in other areas. We could only basically live in this part of the city.
What do you mean not allowed?
So not allowed from one, you've got individual racial discrimination from landlords, but not just that. The council were doing it too. You couldn't, in terms of income, you couldn't do it because you didn't have any money, etc.
So it's not, basically the income thing, that's not because of colour, that's because of income.
Hang on a second. Of course it is.
So poor white people are also living in poor urban areas.
But if you are prevented from getting a better job because of your race, that is clearly about racial discrimination. That still happens.
Undoubtedly that does still happen in individual cases and minority cases. However, how do you explain, if we've got this widespread, horrible racism, institutional, in our employment system, it's all across the board, why do we have an ethnicity pay gap of only 2.3% in the last year, 2019, that we had it? If we are systematically stopping in this country people of ethnic minorities from getting ahead, why is it that some ethnic minority groups, particularly Indians and Chinese, and some black African groups from not Afro-Caribbean, often at the bottom of the pile, other African groups further up, that they are actually often earning more than the average white Briton? How can you say there's institutional racism in the workplace when the facts and the evidence looked at by the Race Commission tells us something completely different?
Well, this is actually interesting, where I said bad scholarship in the report. They say that let's not use the term BAME, let's not lump everybody together. But when they want to pick out a stat that supports their argument, they lump everybody together. Disaggregate that data, Chinese, Indian, Pakistani, Black, British, that you will find there are significant differences.
There are.
And the fact that some ethnic minority groups do better, certainly Indian, Chinese, that's actually about class. That's about empire. That's about who migrated into the country and what resources they have versus who came from different parts of the country. So it's a report that says, on the one hand, you shouldn't do this, but if you want to prove something that backs our case up, we'll do this.
But that was their point, that it is about things like class, and it's also about things like family structure, isn't it? So, for instance, in terms of children doing well in school, that's going to have a massive impact on the future jobs they can do for first, second, third generation of immigrants, or indeed anyone whose family goes back 15 centuries in this country. And the family breakdown is a huge aspect. So we know that the minority ethnic groups where we see strong family units, their children do very well. Where we see, for instance, really sort of lots of family breakdown, and we know Afro-Caribbean families have a high incidence of family breakdown in a way that we don't see from, say, Black African families. And there is a massive disparity in their educational outcomes, and that is thought to be a very big aspect. Now, is that racism that's causing that?
Well, there is not a massive disparity. Actually, Black African and Black Caribbean are actually coming together. And actually, if you look at the actual data properly, you'll find that this idea that Black Africans are doing really well is not actually borne out. The other part of this is this cultural deprivation argument that Tony Sewell's been pushing for a long time. This is about single parent families. One, there is very little evidence that that's actually true. And then the second part of that is, even if we accept that, having one parent in the house is probably going to mean you've got less money, which is probably going to mean you're in lower class, etc. Why is it that there's more family breakdown in African Caribbean communities? You cannot explain that without looking at histories of race, migration, settlement, etc. But also the fact of
Afro-Caribbean families,
criminal justice, etc.
No, African Caribbean families are breaking down, and it's white racist fault, really?
It's because we live in an institutionally racist society that makes it difficult for Black families to stay together. That's very clear. I mean, that is obvious. If you have a community that's under pressure by the police, can't get jobs, what do you expect the family's going to be more likely to break down? And histories of migration and slavery.
Why is that not happening in Asian families? Largely Bangladeshi, Pakistani and Indian families in this country, we don't see the same level of family unit breakdown. And we know family unit breakdown, regardless of the colour of skin, has a massive impact on children's life chances. This is not having a go at single mums by any. I've got plenty. I come from a multi-divorce family myself. That's not the issue. But we know that has a massive impact. Why is the same level of poverty and deprivation and issues apparently facing racism faced by Bangladeshi and Pakistani families? Why is that not causing their family units to break down?
Because when we think about racism, this is actually why we do have to disaggregate. Racism doesn't just play out the same way for every community. There are different stereotypes, there are different histories, and there are different histories that lead to this. And the other part of this isn't actually about family breakdown. It's about class. If you have one parent in that, you're probably going to have less money. Yeah. But we're making this cultural argument. It's about the families and not sticking together. No, it's not. It's actually a class argument, ironically. Right?
I know. I think that's the thing. I think class plays a much, much bigger role. And actually, when you compare a lot of the ethnic minority data with white data in this country, you're often comparing often two completely different things. You're often comparing a largely working class data from a lot of ethnic minority groups compared with data involving working class and middle class and a lot of quite wealthy white people. And it's actually an unfair comparison.
I've got a question then. So if you look at the free school meal data, that tells you that if you're ethnic minority, you're between 2 and 4 times more likely to qualify for free school meals. How do you explain the fact that we are 2 and 3, 4 times more likely to be living in deprivation? That isn't about racism. What is that about?
It's about the long history of people coming here, different generations of first or second or third generation immigrants. It's about educational opportunities, which also affecting white kids. But again, you're making a comparison between all of the white population, 90% of the population, with a very small, much smaller population of ethnic minority people who are largely in certain ethnic minority groups in working class back areas and going to often some pretty poor schools.
No, that's actually not what I'm doing. Actually, I'm just pointing out and saying that the fact that we are in a disproportionate disadvantage is a problem. In fact, the other way around, this report does the other thing. Yep. This report takes only 10% of white children qualify for free school meals. Mm-hmm. It compares those 10% with the 40% of Black Africans, who's are much more diverse in terms of class, etc., and says, well, look, you can see that's what this report does. It's not what I'm doing at all.
Okay, let me ask you about a story that's just broken in the last couple of minutes. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson's most senior Black advisor in Number 10, Samuel Kasumi, has just stepped down, we told, amid the backlash over the racism report. I'm obviously looking for details online about what the reason is for that, specifically why he has stepped down. But what's your instant reaction to that news, as much as we know very little detail?
I mean, it just tells you how appalling this report is. If actually members of the actual Tory party are stepping down. Like I said, I expected it to be terrible. I did not expect it to be this bad. And if it actually got Tories stepping down, it tells you just how terrible this report is.
Okay, well, I can understand that he's Number 10 Special Advisor for Civil Society and Communities. He did announce yesterday that he was going to step down. Back in February, it was revealed that he had written to the Prime Minister saying he was considering leaving over what he called unbearable tensions within Number 10, and it accused the government of pursuing a politics steeped in division. Now, we don't know if that's race-related or not, but do you think that this whole report is going to come back and bite the government, or do you think also there's an element where, I mean, a lot of people are saying that a lot of people who are critical of this are saying, well, they've come with their own prejudices, accusing, Tony Sewell and the members of the commission of starting with their own prejudices, not believing that institutional racism exists. But for people like you, your job is, to teach on these issues. You've written a book, displayed behind you there, The New Age of Empire. There is an argument where there is a race industry where a lot of people's jobs, their livelihoods, their relevance in the media depends on there being this narrative of institutional racism. And if people say, actually, we don't think that does exist, does your relevance cease to exist? I mean, is this report's rather damaging to you personally?
No, because I think in fact, the other thing happens when people say there's no racism. I get more TV time, not less, right? If we actually disagreed there was racism, I wouldn't be on TV, right? So this is where it's actually deeply offensive. Look, I'm a professor. I have worked extraordinarily hard looking at data working. There is so much work about this. This is not, look, I can disagree with people as much as you like, but this is not about disagreement. This is about look at the actual evidence. As you just said, I wrote a whole book about this. The evidence is very clear, and we have to start having an honest discussion. Okay. And this government does not want to do that.